Let's bring in GOP Senator Steve Daines. He sits on the Foreign Relations Committee. He was just in China just last week, and he joins us now. You also, Senator, used to live in China, so you're keenly aware of what goes on there. What did you make of the president, as well as both presidents, the relationship that they talked about? And I just keep going back to this statement when the Chinese president said, as it relates to the relationship, we must make it work.
I could not be prouder of President Trump. And what I just heard, I'm watching this live feed that you're watching as well. I never thought I'd live to see the day when President Xi Jinping said, "We'll make America great again." I mean, this is a great moment. I was just in that great hall literally a week ago today. In fact, if you look at the seating with President Trump, the gentleman to his right is Premier Li Qiang. That's the #2 leader in China. And then around you go Marco Rubio and then Foreign Minister Wang Yi. I met with both the Premier and Wang Yi last week in Beijing with a bipartisan delegation of 5 U.S. senators. And it was just the 4th visit to China in 6 years by U.S. senators. It's so important that we not decouple. We need to engage. We need to, as was just described, promote strategic stability at this moment. It's the 2 largest economies in the world, the 2 largest militaries in the world. There's so much at stake. And I'm so proud of President Trump, who now has been to China twice. President Biden never went to China. President Trump's been there twice. A credit to the president, his team, and those great leaders of America who are there working to get better access for U.S. businesses.
So, Senator, I do worry, though, because of the crackdown on American businesses in China. I do worry because it's basically embedded in their country that they have to take the intellectual property of any company, bank, institution, Meta, whoever wants to do business there. They basically have to be worried about their intellectual property. I don't know if that changes. I mean, I want to believe that to take him at his word, but the actions worry me. Do they worry you?
Well, of course they do. I lived in China back in the 1990s. We were in Guangzhou. My wife and I moved our 2 children. We had 2 more babies born in Hong Kong during those years. I worked for Procter & Gamble. We were there to launch American brands and American business into that massive consumer market. It's a tough place to do business. I'm keenly aware of the intellectual property issues. But you say, what do you do moving forward? We've got to continue to engage, to have the tough conversations, to deconflict, because there's so much at stake. Think about AI. Look what's going on with the fentanyl precursors. We are making progress in that area. That's an issue I brought up with the premier a year ago in Beijing. And we are getting better cooperation from the Chinese now to reduce these precursors coming to the United States. It's a #1 cause of death for 18 to 45-year-old Americans. And so the engagement is critical. You need to have the tough conversations, but isolating and withdrawing is the wrong strategy. I applaud President Trump, Ambassador Perdue, Secretary Rubio, Secretary Bessent for engaging, leaning in, and having these conversations.
Senator, how does all of this play out? Because when you hear both of these speeches, you get the sense that they're friends and that they really respect one another. But China really depends on Iran. 90% of Iran's oil goes to China. China is their biggest customer. And then also there's the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And I was reading about this. It's a major Euro-Asian political, economic, and security alliance. It covers 80% of Eurasia and 40% of the world's population, and it's co-led by China and Russia. It's a non-Western bloc. So when you see images like this and you hear, what should we believe? Where does China really stand behind closed doors?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to overstate what the reality and what's happening now behind closed doors. I mean, there are some tough conversations going on. But it's good to see the public rhetoric that's sound, saying the right things. And the Chinese and the American leaders want to see mutual respect from one another. So the rhetoric has been good. But the tough conversations will continue. There's tough conversations about Iran. There's tough conversations about intellectual property. There's tough conversations about what's going on in the Taiwan Strait. But it's much more important that we have those conversations than to completely decouple and withdraw, because that can lead to conflict. And that's something that we cannot allow to happen, where escalation could occur in the Taiwan Strait, as an example.
I do hear you on that, because it's good to be able to pick up the phone and say, how do we solve this? And evidently they've done that before. I just want to get your take before we go to Bill Hemmer. They've gotten rid of 2 defense ministers, 9 senior paramilitary figures, 115 provincial ministerial level officials have been under investigation. He's doing a mini purge, and I have not heard a good explanation of what's going on there. Is he worried about his back? Is he worried about corruption? Does he just want fresh blood? What do you think?
Well, some of these military advisors have been President Xi Jinping's closest advisors and friends for many, many years. President Xi Jinping has taken some very strong and aggressive actions in cleaning up a lot of his military leaders. I think there's a combination of corruption and also fear of loyalty. He definitely has assembled power, and he is the most powerful leader in China. And when you're the most powerful leader, you're always worried about challenges to that power. So I think it's probably a combination of corruption as well as potential challenges to his power.
All right, Senator, thanks so much for joining Fox and Friends this morning on this the breaking news here.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.